Welcome to the Solar Farm Summit live stream. This is part two of a three-part series that we are kicking off ahead of the 2025 Solar Farm Summit. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks to all of y'all who are coming back from the first episode, where we began to ponder this big question facing our energy and our agricultural markets and stakeholders. It's really a combination of emergencies. And in the last part, we talked a lot about kind of the biggest picture. We started in antiquity, and then we zoomed in on the United States. And today we are going to be discussing mostly China, but a little bit of comparative geography, comparative economics, some juxtaposition, particularly across the Pacific between China and the United States. So we are the Solar Farm Summit. We're doing a lot of different things. We do the Virginia Solar Summit. We have the North American Agrivoltaics coming up at the 2025 Solar Farm Summit. The future is very bright indeed. Solar Farm tours coming later this summer, and looking forward to catching a lot of y'all out on the road. But today is part two of answering the energy and agricultural emergencies in farming communities. Thanks again for joining us. We hope to see you very soon at the 2025 Solar Farm Summit at McCormick Place. So save the date, register if you haven't, August 4th through 7, right there, that beautiful building that you can see on the left-hand side in the gorgeous downtown of Chicago, Illinois. We are brought to you again this year by title sponsor, American Farmland Trust. Thank you, AFT, for believing in us, believing in this community, and supporting it so vigorously, and all the work that they're doing. Make sure you're stay tuned to all the different things. They have a lot of different professionals, very smart people working kind of up and down the agricultural spectrum, and grateful for all their work. And we look forward to seeing a lot of their team on the ground with us at the Solar Farm Summit, as well as all of our brownfield cousins. I'm an old brownfielder. I'll do my bio a little bit. But we are very proud and honored to be co-locating this year's Solar Farm Summit with US EPA's big show, the Brownfields National Training Conference, Brownfields 2025. Check out the website, gobrownfields.org. It's co-hosted there with ICMA, and very grateful for their partnership to help us expand, dig into this full spectrum land use renaissance from the badlands, those polluted brownfields and Superfund sites and mined lands, all the way over to our very best lands, our prime ag lands, our super productive soils. And that's what the big show is going to be all about. Next month, less than a month away, just off the downtown area there. You can find all these fun maps on our website, solarfarmsummit.com. Chicago has a couple different airports. Midway Airport is slightly closer. And the highway in between O'Hare, one of the highways in between O'Hare and downtown, is under construction. But you can hit that CTA blue line. That's as predictable as the train should be. Or the orange line, too, from Midway Airport. And there's a lot of transit options to get to McCormick Place itself. There's not too many hotels right by McCormick Place, but not too far away, just a couple CTA stops or Metro stops to the cluster of hotels throughout kind of downtown Chicago. A lot of great restaurants too. We'll have back-to-back after hours at this year's show as usual. Thanks to all of our great sponsors this year, because we take the social as serious as the substance. Of course, this is it's all about people power, whatever your business. Here's just a little bit more. If you're not from Chicago, not used to Chicago, it's not too hard, actually. We're making a little map you'll be able to take with you wherever you go on your phone, which will have a lot of this keyed in for you already. But Chicago makes it pretty easy. There's many different stops, and we have some of them highlighted here. The big train, the Metro train, is pretty cheap, and you can get on it down there at Millennium Station and just take a few stops. It stops at McCormick Place, as well as the green line and the red line there. They're a little bit more of a walk. But most of the transit options in Chicago will get you to McCormick Place. I meant to put the bus line, but there's a couple different bus lines with a number, super easy. And of course, Uber, taxi, there's like taxi drop-offs. So it's the largest conference center in North America, McCormick Place, and it has all the infrastructure that you would hope. Okay, today's roadmap, that was the introduction. We are going to look at begin kind of where we began last time, focusing in a little bit on the US, excuse me, but putting it into a larger context with China there, and then zoom into China. China's growing pains. We'll look at how they'll grow along with us in the next phase of the global energy game, and I'm an old energy attorney. Um, we'll look at China's food and freshwater fragility. And then we'll explore agrivoltaics, maybe as China's all-in-one answer, potentially to the point of unleashing the green dragon. We're having a little fun with that. All right, so brace yourselves. I'm going to go fast. We're going to have fun with a lot of economics. Did I skip my bio slide somewhere? Maybe it's coming up. No, sorry, I meant to plug it in, y'all. I'm just Dan French, executive producer of the Solar Farm Summit, retired attorney, and well, semi more of a consultant. And troubleshooting a lot of America recently. Or in my career. Last time we began with kind of diagnosing the United States, and this is one of my all-in maps. The Distressed Communities Index, which is updated regularly, relies on a lot of census data and county level data. You can find this, and it kind of sums it all up for me. We have a tale of two cities, or two counties, at least in the United States, really since the dot-com crash. Some of our communities have truly been left behind. You know, we've had incredible growth, stock markets at all-time highs, and corporate profits, and still millions and millions of open jobs, but a lot of it has been created in the denser places. And so if you're in a distressed community, you've had net zero business formation since the year 2000. And it's not just flyover country, sparsely populated. It's almost a third of the United States. You know, 114.4 million Americans are living in distressed or at-risk communities. And if you happen to be unlucky enough to be there, your life expectancy is 5 years less. So this is kind of the menu of troubleshooting that we professionals are engaged in when tackling rural development. And it's not all these things for any one community, but this is just kind of the all-in list, you know, from poverty and food deserts, just poor infrastructure, access to local food, those food deserts. You know, each community is unique in its strengths and weaknesses. Last time we looked at these charts, just to diagnose America, this time we are going to borrow from the work of Michael Semblest from J.P. Morgan, who drew this line on some of these charts when China joined the WTO. And this is kind of background, you know, what we're going to look kind of at the trade war, or the big picture behind the trade war, and everything we're about. It's not all China's fault, but you can see when China joined the WTO in 2001, U.S. industrial production began to flag. And this is what the trade war is kind of all about. It's been this explosive growth in China. So in the year 2000, U.S. trade was $2 trillion, more than 4 times China. And China's basically had explosive growth, 1,200% growth in that time. And the script has flipped. If you haven't seen this chart, this is kind of where we were in the year 2000. The United States kind of dominating global trade. And, you know, there's China, number one with 25 countries, about 13% of the world. But just 2 decades later, completely the inverse. So the United States down to the number one trader with just 38 countries and 20% of the world. And now China heads up. The EU is not in here, so this is heads up trade. But now compared to the United States, you know, they're just dominating global exports. And it precipitated all these negative inflection points that we'll look at again here. And this is U.S. labor share of gross profits down. Manufacturing jobs took a dip. They bounced more recently. That's not so bad. Poverty rates ticked up. You know, social media was coming in at this time, mobile phones, but the suicide rate, unfortunately, also kind of bottomed around this time when the global trade mix began to inverse, and as well as the deaths of despair. This is some congressional research. Is a big body of work that I recommend folks find if you have the stomach for it. But we've seen this kind of strange spike in deaths of despair, suicides, alcohol-related deaths, drug-related deaths, which are actually the highest since 1941. So you got to go all the way back to the peak anxiety of World War II. And here you can see it broken out by demographics. And quite sadly, it's some of the biggest spikes have been in our younger demographics, our young people. So it's American exceptionalism of the wrong kind. This is a little bit dated. We have bounced more recently out of the pandemic. A lot of countries bounced down during COVID, whereas most others have recovered, we really have not. And the urban-rural divide, there's always kind of been a divide in the death rate or a difference, but it's grown. So just coming back to the Distressed Communities Index again, to kind of show the correlation with this deaths of despair. It's a lot of our distressed communities where the deaths of despair are clustering. And it's the larger story we talked about last time, the brownfield story. There is a lot of legacy pollution and cancer, unfortunately, clusters. And America's rusty. We're on kind of our post-industrial decline, and we have a lot of 1 and 2 factory towns now that just have 1 or 2 brownfields. Some of them quite large. And our friends at EPA estimate, even though we've been at this work remediating brownfields for a long time, there are still 450,000, 500,000, 1 million. Nobody really knows how many brownfields are out there. But if you're in a small town, you certainly know where your brownfields are. And so China, coming back, as we've been kind of descending down and taking the hit, China has surpassed us in terms of life expectancy, which for some folks is kind of the all-in number. So back in 2021, we crossed them in the wrong way. If you're looking from an American perspective, and it's not, it costs quite a lot though. We've also they've jumped us in some other ways, and we're going to start to explore some of that now. So debt to GDP, China unfortunately has jumped ahead, and that's I should back up to say that's just disclosed. Some folks will tell you there's a lot of debt kind of hiding at the local level and here and there, and this number may be a lot higher. China has a debt problem. We'll come back to that. Not all wasted though, not just bridges to nowhere. They have a very nice train system, very, very fast, very efficient, the latest and greatest. There it is, bullet train, really nice, electric. They've spent a lot of money at home and a lot of money abroad. So this is One Belt, One Road, a multi-trillion-dollar plan, as big as the Marshall Plan, bigger, an order of magnitude bigger than the Marshall Plan post World War II, and is linking China to an even larger extent to the global community. China very dependent on trade. Some will say the most dependent nation when it comes to international trade. Another way we inverse the United States, actually 90% of our economy is intra nation. So, and if you give me Canada and Mexico, I can get another 5%. So really, the United States is the most independent nation with respect to international trade. But you can see China's trade flows by value, and we are their number 1 trading partner. And they have a lot at stake, a lot in the air and on the seas. They used to be more dependent on us. Still, though, we are their largest customer. You can just kind of see some of the breakout on the left there. But Belt and Road, the idea is to kind of diversify, right? Not put all their eggs in one basket. They've been quite successful. And as of last year, about half of their trade now, in total import and export volume is in the Belt and Road system. So they're weaning off of us. But for a lot of analysts, they are this recent and impressive and historic growth. It's brought hundreds of millions of folks in China out of poverty, but in the terms of this gentleman, Mr. Kyle Bass, he's Heyman Capital Management, quite dour. He's an investor, a global investor, and his opinion here, I'll quote: "There's nothing that's going to bail China out of their economic spiral. They're having a real estate crisis, a banking crisis, a youth unemployment crisis, and now they need to be worried about their current account." when you look at total debt to GDP, China is the worst offender in the world. So, Mr. Bass, many others, this very fast growth has come at a great cost, and they're way out on a limb, so to speak, and that branch will break, and the debt will blow up. But Mr. Bass is not alone. This is Peter Zion, maybe. I've heard it pronounced multiple ways, and his quote here: "We're actually looking at the disassociation of China as a unified industrial nation state within the decade." That was very recent, just last month. He's got some reasons for that. Pretty bold prediction: a nation state collapsing. But China's the most trade dependent country in human history. He would say they import 75 to 80% of their energy. They're importing 80% of the stuff that allows them to grow their own food. They are the world's largest importer of food. They import all the raw commodities that they need to make their manufactured products, and then they export most of those manufactured products. So if something happens to trade for any reason, they're the first ones to go and the ones that fall the hardest. So pretty hard view on the just physical economics of China, and that's where I'll pick up. If you're familiar with my work at all, and I'm sorry we meant to include the bio, but I've done a lot of global work, foreign direct investment, capital markets, and strategic planning, and I've been very dour on China for many of the reasons that Peter mentions, and it has a lot to do with their economic geography, and we'll get into some of that now. And it is, I think, certainly true that China has the most fragile economic geography on Earth. They are the most resource constrained and geographically restricted. And these are some of the big ones on the screen: energy, water, soil, food, pollution, desertification, depopulation, and finance, which we could have put growth in there, banking. Peter mentioned, and Kyle Bass, the real estate crisis. But let's diagnose China a little bit. So they're the world's largest meat importer, and you can see their imports have grown as China's gotten richer. As any country gets richer, they tend to eat more meat, and that certainly happened with China. U.S. agricultural exports have steadily grown and spiked kind of up and down with the trade wars, but those volumes have increased. And here you can see just kind of the breakdown by value, where China is getting its food. So Brazil is actually their number one partner, followed closely by the United States, but also Russia, Vietnam, Canada makes the list. We'll come back to that. Remember some of those names. And Peter mentioned this. Fertilizer use per hectare, China, is tops in the world. So they don't have high quality soil, not very much, and so they've had to compensate chemically, and they do so with a lot of fertilizer that they have to import. This may be the biggest problem. I think certainly Peter Zan would profess to demographics being the domino that may take China down, and soon they've revised some of their population, some of their census data down. They overcounted. Won't get into all that now, but they had the one-child policy. They've done away with that, but they have the mother of all baby booms coming, and that creates growth problems for all kinds of reasons. Fractional reserve banking, the way loans work, and if it's just, we've seen these lessons. Japan. It's also a concern for much of the developed world. Europe, how do you grow down? It's a lot easier when your population is growing. People are having babies. People are buying strollers, sending their kids to college. But China's population has seemingly peaked sooner than we thought. And it could be quite a slippery slope down. That's already hurting their economic growth. And just an article from the Wall Street Journal here, which is where we pulled President Xi holding up the dragon there, and kind of summarizing what our two analysts said previously. China's economy is burdened by years of excess Excess debt, excess capacity, all kinds of things. Here's how bad it really is. Have they overbuilt? Certainly. We have, as an economics community, been revising down and further down their GDP forecast. So, 10 years ago, we really thought China was ripping. They would have surpassed the United States by now as the world's largest economy. That hasn't really happened. The Great Recession really threw China for a loop, and the United States, has recovered much more strongly. And here you can just see the Wall Street Journal kind of summarizing. I think these are consensus GDP forecasts, and the most recent, again, revising down, just a smoother, lower trajectory for Chinese GDP growth as they run into some of these kind of limits and the exhaustion of their current economic models. And here you can see more consensus economic views from Focus Economics, who put together a lot of different opinions. Going forward, the community believes we'll see continued Chinese deceleration. Some of it's just built in. So what pieces does China have to play on the board? Let's look at that. They want to be the number one economy in the world. We know something about that in the United States, and a lot of it has to do with energy. You have to power your economy, and we've moved into kind of a different phase of the energy game. We're a long way away from the Alaska pipeline and a lot of the oil stories of my childhood. It's about natural gas now and other things. And here we can see China actually surpassed the United States as the top crude oil importer quite some time ago, not quite 10 years ago. But they have a more oil intensive economy than we do now. It's also a supply story for the United States. Around the same time, we shifted from a quest for energy independence, drill baby drill, to dominance. We became an exporter around the same time, a genuine supply boom. Here, one of my favorite slides, you can see kind of before and after the fracking light up the Dakotas, like Chicago, in just a decade. More than doubled domestic oil production in less than a decade, brought on a lot of natural gas, and started to export almost straight away. And by the summer of 2018, Texas was exporting more oil than it was importing for the first time ever, going back to the heydays. And so here you can see the United States really now dominating, particularly in natural gas, which the world is very hungry for, burns cleaner than coal. And so the United States now is the top LNG exporter. It used to be Russia. It's an old story. From World War II, they've supplied Europe with a lot of gas, and they still are. Even as the war rages, Russian gas is finding its way to Europe through pipelines that still haven't blown up. But Australia, Qatar, other nations have stepped up too. There's a lot more liquefied natural gas floating on the oceans. And that's brought emissions down and been kind of a whole new story for growth and other things. Here you can see the United States export capacity. Basically, as soon as the fracking boom came out of its infancy, we started to export, and a lot. We became a net exporter there back in 2018. As I mentioned, we've added a lot of LNG export capacity in the years since. There's a huge economic incentive to do so because we have the cheapest, most abundant natural gas in the world. And here you can see the spread. If you're in Asia, if you're in Europe, you're paying double, probably triple the price for natural gas for every BTU. And forward from here, we have a lot of projects in construction. So these are not projections. These facilities that you can see in Canada, Mexico, and the United States are going to roughly kind of double our export capacity. So this fracking story, the natural gas story in the United States, is reaching more mature stages. We're kind of leveling up, and we're going to start to supply the world. And here you can see some import capacities coming online elsewhere, particularly Asia Pacific, ready to take that very cheap U.S. natural gas. Probably will increase our prices, less at home. If you're paying attention politically, you've probably seen many a prime minister and president come to the White House, including Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba here, making deals for U.S. liquefied natural gas. Happy to sell it to them. because we were hooked on the junk. There's Uncle Sam. Again, the old oil story, resource wars, the century of scarcity. And, when I was a young energy attorney, we were in Iraq. Um, and there were a lot of reasons for that. But Mr. Greenspan, former chairman of the Federal Reserve, he wrote a book in 2007. You can see there, The Age of Turbulence, Adventures in the New World. And mentioned therein that he's saddened that it's politically inconvenient to acknowledge what everyone knows, that the Iraq War is mostly about oil. So not news probably to most Americans, how sensitive we've been to oil prices and the lengths that we went. Iraq was quite far away, but we had that economic incentive to do so. The American way of life is non-negotiable, and but that's the old story, right? We've had our supply boom, and now it's China's problem. Maybe they're pulling the global gas, crude oil and natural gas back to their markets as the world's largest importer. And here you can see the explosive growth, as well as where they're getting it from. A lot from Russia, Saudi Arabia, Iraq. And I don't see Iran on the list because maybe it was sanctioned, but they're definitely getting a lot of oil from Iran. I think most of Iran's oil is going to China, and quite long supply chains. So here we can see their import of crude oil by nation and kind of a volume. If you look by the thickness of the line, and we know what that's like in the United States. But we were not so sensitive to ocean geography. So a lot of there's a handful of choke points in the world. The Straits of Malacca are one, and that's where China's all the ships that want to get from the Middle East to China, for example, have to float by Singapore and the Straits of Malacca. So here you can see 1/3 of all global petroleum products are flowing through the South China Sea, south of Thailand, and 20% of that is going to China. So South China Seas are a big deal. Here you can just kind of see the spread, the volume of crude oil and condensate floating through the Straits of Malacca, and China. China is the biggest customer. And here is just the LNG. So this is just the same kind of thing, natural gas. A little bit more of the world's natural gas is floating through the Straits of Malacca, 34%. So that's what the hubbub in the news is. We'll make y'all geopolitical experts today. Why does China care so much about the South China Sea? It's really because of many reasons, but one of those reasons is certainly energy and its necessity to secure those global oil supplies. In Taiwan, the latest news that there's the 9-line, the 10-line, and in August 2023, China added a dash, basically the green dash you can see up there on the other side, the wrong side of Taiwan, depending on who you talk to. But it's not just the Straits of Malacca. That happens to be the largest, most significant choke point in the world. But let's zoom in quickly to the Strait of Hormuz. That is not far behind. The second choke point, there it is, between the Emirates and Iran. Very short distance. And here you can see the split, what is going through the Straits of Hormuz. It's a lot of Saudi oil, but China, again, is the biggest customer. And I think that Iran number is a little bit fuzzy. Recently in the news, of course. So China cares about the South China Sea, and it also cares about the Indian Ocean. And here you can see kind of the distribution of Belt and Road investments in and around the Indian Ocean. Hundreds and hundreds of projects in nations with exclusive economic zones in the water. And here again, you can see China joining the WTO in 2001 and the explosion of trade. Its share of trade in the Indian Ocean is now the largest. And it's mostly civil infrastructure, but there are two. I'm highlighting two military outposts here. China and India, you can see them, Djibouti and the Agalega Islands. And hopefully it doesn't come to blows, but China just patrolling piracy. They have interest in forward deployment into this area. And Djibouti, of course, is right there in the Red Sea, where the Houthis have made plenty of trouble for international trade. So, geopolitical question, though, on the minds of many, can any country dependent on food and energy imports win a great power war? That's what they're talking about at the Naval Academy. Great power war, World War III. That's kind of the question that hangs over China. If they're so dependent on food and energy coming from so far away, and they can just be embargoed, they can just be blockaded. Is that a recipe for victory? It's been tried, right? The Empire of Japan tried something very similar in World War II. Bomb Pearl Harbor, knocked the United States out of the war, and then kind of rush to go get the oil and food supplies that they would need to maintain their military machine. Won't go through all that now, but we know kind of how it worked out. So having said all that, I want to put Taiwan into context. Again, the 10- line. What does Taiwan get you? Is it worth going over all that open water to get the Taiwan semiconductor? I mean, this is in the news every day now. And I don't know, but it's certainly not going to help their food or energy independence, because Taiwan is even more import dependent than China. So Taiwan's importing 70% of its food, making it, of course, very susceptible to embargo and blockade. But if China were to take the expense to take Taiwan, those factories might not be standing, and they'd have a very food that would only make their food dependency that much greater. China also has territorial disputes with most, not all, of its neighbors. So, if a shooting war broke out, China could have problems all over. So quite a stretched and challenged geography, and it really is a poor setup, maybe reminiscent of the American story after the oil shocks of the early 1970s. So is China a modern Humpty Dumpty repeating America's mistakes, destined to repeat it? And instead of a Humpty Dumpty, some folks have referred to China as kind of the porcelain panda, very fragile, very, very susceptible in these very fundamental ways, food and energy. We need to eat to survive. So is China doomed to import oil forever? Are they just making those bets, building bases in the Middle East? Not quite. As I think this audience knows, a lot of our solar farm folks and just regular solar folks, China is leading the way in renewable electricity and that whole suite of technology. And just on their own, I mean, they're going to build, IEA estimates, as you can see, that they may build more than half, 60% of all the renewable energy projects in the whole world in the next 5 years. So they're betting on electric, and not just like solar and wind, but a broad suite of those technologies, electrolyzers, heat pumps, a lot of electrical technology. And the reason why is because electricity, depending on how you generate your electricity, right, it can reduce your exposure to inflation. So shout out RMI putting this graphic together. And so you can see if you bet on gas, your fixed costs, your upfront costs may be lower, but you've got to keep buying that gas. And if the price of natural gas starts to globalize, we could see maybe prices gravitate higher over the next few decades. Maybe that's not as good of a bet as spending more on solar up front and then not ever fueling up again. The electrons are kind of falling on the panels every day, right? And we have similar savings elsewhere as we trade from molecules to electrons, which is kind of a catchy phrase you can find Wall Street analysts talking about. Electrons are just more efficient than molecules, even at an atomic level. And so that's China's big bet. They're betting on this fuel-free build-out. And they're importing a lot of oil and gas today, but maybe not for long. Electricity is the key. Again, shout out RMI for doing this geographic analysis and pointing out that really you can't have a strong economy and high growth with high electricity prices. So electrification is already key, and China is keyed in on it. And so it's playing the electric leapfrog game. And we have seen, again, they've brought hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. One must marvel and respect what the Chinese people have been able to accomplish in just a few short generations, including the fastest electrification that we've ever seen. RMI and others, calling China the first major electrostate. So already surpassed the United States and Europe. And here again, just another look by flow in clean energy investments. China just absolutely dwarfing Europe and the EU. And here you can see the exponential growth across the clean technology spectrum. Solar, wind, EVs, batteries, all explosive growth and clustering. We have just some of these very specialized regions. There's a lot of gains in that kind of clustering, like Silicon Valley here in the United States. Proximity matters, both hardware and software, and I mean human software. And so no surprise, you can see here just China dominating. Also, they don't have oil and gas. We should have mentioned that. Why do they have to import all that oil and gas? Well, they don't have their own. They don't have the fertilizer. Something they do have is the rare earths, and they're certainly leveraging that. It's helping their quest for electrification, of course. And no surprise, I would suppose, they're just dominating both the processing and the manufacturing, the mining of these materials necessary for batteries. And so China is the clean tech price maker. Here you can see prices in a precipitous state of collapse. And the panels and batteries are maybe too cheap. Just last week, Xi Jinping, in a meeting with China's most important, I guess, finance planning group, they talked about maybe culling some of the lower quality panels, acknowledging they have overcapacity, just kind of timing with the BBB here in the United States, but probably some oversupply in China, and we'll see some scaling back. But they're leading really across the board. So here you can see, unfortunately, patents exploding. In the United States and Europe, innovation has kind of declined. We've seen a net loss in total patents. Not so in China, and you may have seen the news recently that a Chinese battery and auto manufacturer now has an amazing new battery that runs forever, so to speak. And BYD, this made news earlier this year in March. Now the world's that 5-minute battery was announced, and the stock climbed as much as 6% and lifted its market value to almost 162 billion, more than Ford, General Motors, and Volkswagen combined. Excuse me. Also, robots. China is installing more than half the world's robots. As you can see, more than the rest of the developed world combined. So electrifying across all sectors. And I'm sure you've seen on TikTok and Instagram and elsewhere just some of the amazing innovations and advancements that the Chinese have made in a lot of their industrial manufacturing and commercial processes. Building structures with robots, building railroads with robots, building solar farms with robots. So it's part of their foreign direct investment story, EFDI, all the batteries, electric EVs, renewables, they're exporting it to the world, including here in the United States. Here you can see the comparative electric tech trade flows versus the United States. So again, China just, you can see, dominating lithium ion, electric cars, solar panels and modules. Whereas the United States, we've had this second crude oil boom. It was actually the biggest crude carbon boom, crude oil and natural gas boom of all time, bigger than the Saudis in the 60s. And we are taking it to global markets. And of course, China has really no oil and gas and exporting almost nothing, very little. I think just some refined product. All right, so we're getting there. We just went through all that. That was kind of the energy story, and you can see how China maybe is going for something different, a new recipe, skipping a step and going full electric. And that's not they're not done though. They've got some of those other weaknesses that we mentioned before, and we're going to zoom in now on China's food and freshwater fragility. So we did energy. And now we're going to zoom in on some of these others. There's China, beautiful land, beautiful people, very diverse, very mountainous, very rugged geography, dense jungles, tall mountains, dry deserts, lots of deserts. So here you can see China really dominated by deserts in the north and the west. And that's one of the key, aspects of the Chinese story is precious little fresh water. So 6% of the world's fresh water, even though they have 20% of its people. It's a story that goes way back all the way to the beginning of Chinese history, battling the deserts, battling the rivers. Today, nearly 18% of China's landmass is suffering from desertification. Here's China's rivers. They don't have anything quite like the Mississippi. Nobody really does, except for Brazil and the Amazon. But they do have some rivers, particularly the Yellow and the Yangtze there. But there's been years where they've kind of have run out. They haven't quite reached the sea. But it's been the cradle of Chinese civilization, these river valleys. There is agriculture, very productive. I think most folks know that story, but very prone to flooding, particularly throughout history, before kind of modern history here. And so China has a very intimate relationship with the land, I suppose, like we all do. But here you can see kind of the spread of water consumption per capita, with the United States just kind of an embarrassment of fresh water on the left and China on the right. And there's also kind of a function of water. Water demand is a function of its population density, which clusters in some of its largest cities closer to the oceans. And even in the south, China is heating up, and there's some of its scientists fear that as the planet is warming, that China is warming the most. It's had some severe droughts in recent history, more so than other nations. Back in 2022, you may have seen or remember this severe drought in its not in its drylands, down in the wettest parts of China. The Yangtze River reached its lowest level going back to 1865. It was for 70 straight days, more than 40 degrees Celsius. It's 105 degrees Fahrenheit. And here you can see the water levels measured at its major hydrologic stations. So China has a lot of hydrogeologic power, a lot of hydro. But if the water gets too low, that hydropower doesn't flow. And so they actually had some industrial production that was taken offline because the drought was too intense. And here you can see the millions of kilowatt hours that China lost in some of its manufacturing clusters that we saw previously. So China's ancient water crisis is a contemporary water crisis, and the rapid industrialization since the 1970s has compounded this crisis. 90% of Chinese groundwater is polluted today, 75% of its rivers and lakes, 50% of its water is unsuitable for agriculture, and 15% of its drinking water is contaminated. So this is very front of mind in China. And this combination of environmental degradation and inclement weather and policy is moving agriculture. As you can see kind of on the screen, Um, Quite intentionally, the Chinese are finding, potatoes need cool nights. And so places where potatoes were growing before, they're not growing as well, and it's on the move. So this is not a new story, right? In China, you're probably familiar. The Great Green Wall, it's called the Three North Shelter Forest Program, actually began in 1978. So they've been at this for quite a long time. Um, and still up to now, mixed results, still prone to dust storms. And here you can see one there in 2021, um, quite intense, real blackout, and coming right through, the Three North Shelter Forest. They planted billions of trees that have died. Trees need water, so it's terraforming a planet is quite a challenge indeed for any nation. But this is Beijing. This is back in 2021. Pretty intense dust storm that made big news. There's Beijing. It feels a bit like a science fiction movie. She's got a mask for the dust there, as does this gal. It looks like the end of the world. And Chinese media calls it the war on sand. And here you can see one lone man with a shovel out there battling the deserts. Of course, he's not alone. They've been planting trees. It's part of their civic culture, particularly in these regions. Everyone gets involved. They have quite a problem at scale. Here you can see some of their sand locking technology at work. These straw patches, drip irrigation on wheels, and getting the kids involved. So really, it's a cultural, inclusive aspect, of China. They're all in this battle, this war on the sand together, to hopefully get to some of this. Not unfamiliar to the United States agricultural community, certainly, or rural folks. We do our own tree breaks and prairie strips, and China has been successful here and there, but it really is a measure of their growth economically, environmentally, civically, and the great game of nations. China requires water maximizing technologies. And now we're going to look at in the time we have left, and I'll stay for overtime if there's questions. Make full use of the time today. Greenhouses is one of those things. And that's because greenhouses can conserve 90% of water or more. And this is from our friends at NASA Earth Observatory. You can see here in 1987 versus today, a sea of glass. Now let's zoom into that area of detail. China has put an almost unimaginable amount of agriculture under glass in greenhouses. Now 60% of all the planet's greenhouses are in China, almost 2 million hectares. And so glass works, it's working in China. And now this is the next level, solar glass. Glass that generates electricity, uses the same concepts, but also happens to produce power, harvest electrons from the sun. And for that reason, this dual use, this multi-purpose, multi-revenue stream, multifunctional platform makes it not only adaptable to all kinds of environmental conditions and agriculture, but also scalable. And I would argue it's the most promising water conservation tech for all those reasons. And now we're going to get into how China is starting to leverage it and has been leveraging it for actually many years now, and helped play a part in getting me so interested in agrivoltaics. I noticed, or recently, earlier this year, they made a big announcement. You may have seen the Taklamakan Desert in Western China has been finally successfully ring-fenced. What has helped China break through and get over the enemy of the desert in its war on sand is this photovoltaic sand locking technology. They've figured out that a way to conserve water without using it, rather than planting trees, you can use glass. And so with the combination, the full suite of all their anti-desertification technologies, including the straw that we saw earlier, China's green belts are now blossoming. This is some marketing material that they put out, showing how the 3 North Shelter Belt Forest Program is really breaking through. This is out in the Uyghur Autonomous Region, Western China, really starting to pick up the pace. How is this happening? How are they problem solving with solar? That's what this agrivoltaic stuff is all about. It's the integration of agriculture and photovoltaics, and you can set it up lots of different ways. It's ultimately adaptable, as I mentioned, and it works because of the power of the shade. So if plants get too hot, they need water. They use water. They sweat, kind of like humans do. It's called evapotranspiration. And while that's happening, they can't grow or grow their fruit or veggie. And so keeping plants a little bit cooler and water more plentiful is actually better. So throwing shade is solar energy's new superpower. I love this headline from Bloomberg a couple years ago. This is actually matcha and mustard greens in Japan, which is, I think, led the way. They have more agrivoltaics-enabled solar farms than anywhere else in the world. China's catching up at scale, which we'll see. But the whole world, farmers all around the world, are figuring out that you can grow things under the solar panels, and that the partial shade for many things is actually a net benefit. Awesome graphic from NREL. Shout out the National Renewable Energy Lab for helping lead the way, breaking a lot of ground in the United States. And I want to pivot to the United States quickly before I go back to the United States, just so you can see some of our research, but a lot of different ways. Even conservation, what they call ecovoltaics, works under the panels. But this is the breakthrough American results out at Biosphere 2. University of Arizona, shout out Professor Greg Barron-Gafford, back in 2019 had published this paper revealing kind of this energy, water, food nexus. There's a lot happening under the panels, and so I think about it as a really a stack of value add. It's keeping the panels cooler even. But the real magic is the agriculture, the water savings. Here you can see on the left, under the panels, the peppers were 3x using half of the water, and they doubled the tomatoes using only 2/3 of the water. So that's what it looks like. The jalapenos just kind of hung in there. And this was early, and this was accidental. Not all results will be like this. They just had a fixed tilt system. We've got all kinds of fancy new trackers, but this really stood out and captured a lot of people's attention, opening new ideas of what's possible under the panels. In the years since, all around the world, farmers are figuring it out. This is my new favorite study. That the Arizona study was my old favorite, but I like to drink wine. And last fall in 2024, here in Tresseré, France, the grapes, the vineyards, loved it under the panels. Chardonnay plus 60% yield and better quality grapes, they said. That's what it looks like. Just solar trellises over the vineyard. And not only were they cooler in the summer, but there was a frost last year, and the panels kept the vines a little bit warmer, and there was a lot less frost loss versus the control fields. And again, we can see that irrigation savings. And so agrivoltaics kind of works like an open air greenhouse. Fraunhofer Institute in Germany, they broke, I think they had the first aha moment back in the early 80s. And it was this, shifting from this either or to both and had some great results with potatoes. A little bit less solar energy in the footprint, but a little bit better for the potatoes that do need those cool nights and cool days. Mentioning conservation, this is the last American bit, but wanted our audience to see this 5-year study from Minnesota, courtesy of Argonne National Labs. where they tripled the total insect population over 5 years, and the native bee population was plus 20x. So you can plant the right things, you can create ideal habitats, and if you build it, Mother Nature will come. Zooming back into China, let's see how they're putting this into effect at scale in our most challenging environments on Earth, our deserts. The Kabuki Desert, you can find this article on Bloomberg. China's remote deserts are hiding an energy revolution. There's what it looked like. That's what it looked like in 2017. Again, shout out NASA for the before and after. By 2024, we had the Guinness Book of World Records for the largest image made from solar panels, covering this whole section of desert there on the edge, and enabled for agriculture. So they raised some of the panels up over 8 feet. And here you can see these gentlemen planting. There you can see this farmer. Looks like he's got a tea kettle there. There's the Taklamakan Desert. We saw ring fenced earlier, but let's zoom in now on Qinghai Lake, which is just southwest of Wuwei there, in the Longyang Gorge Reservoir. And let's zoom in. This is what it looked like in 2011, kind of a desertifying western grassland with ranching in retreat. 2014, started to install some panels. 2019, pretty good coverage. By 2020, had the whole valley covered across the length there and brought the flocks back. So this is solar grazing at a huge scale, PV plus sheep, 2.2 gigawatts worth, returning the grasses and the grass grazers to Western China, creating livelihoods in Western China, saving the ranchers in retreat, right, with the deserts on the march. So really making solar do more. Here you can find this study, this research paper that was published recently in China, finding that photovoltaic development has primarily induced positive effects on the region's microclimate, physical and chemical properties of the soil, and diversity of the plant and microbial communities, as supported by the recent findings. So this is after it's built, the results are kind of in, and we know that solar panels can be soil positive and create these microclimatic conditions that have high function and high value, either ecologically or agriculturally. And with it, China is pushing back the deserts. Let's look at Ningxia, a little bit closer, but equally desertified. This, I think, is still the largest agrivoltaics-enabled solar farm in the world. They're doing goji berries, lots of goji berries, 1 gigawatt worth of goji berries. There it is, putting a lot of people to work and harvesting a lot of berries, as you can see there. And this is, a function of direct state policy. So purposefully and intentionally, as I mentioned, they're deploying agrivoltaics to combat desertification. Here you can see that goji berry farm being constructed in 2018. Which led to the inclusion of this strategy, in China's 5-year plan, which in 2020 they put out they had that Congress, and for their 2021 and 2025 plan, it specifically included large-scale development of this sand plus solar anti-desertification method. And President Xi Jinping was making many statements as well. China will continue to promote the adjustment of industrial structure and energy structure, vigorously develop renewable energy, and accelerate the planning and construction of large-scale wind and solar projects in desert areas. That was back in October 11 of 2021. So the prior 5 years and really 10 years, China had its kind of pilot stages and some accidental discoveries under the panels. Many different independent ahas have happened similarly all around the world, in Australia, in the United States, and China is not left behind, and they need it maybe more than anyone else. And I'll read this last quote. The same day in the same statement, President Xi pointed out, when we protect nature, it rewards us. When we exploit nature ruthlessly, it punishes us without mercy. All right, let's look, zoom up to Wu Wei. There's a river there, but very dry on the edge of the deserts. They have done their own greenhouse things. The greenhouses we looked at before were Eastern China. This is Western China, doing greenhouses quite successfully and quite recently. So let's look at some time lapse again. Here's Wu Wei in 2012. Here it is in 2020. There's a whole village over there. You might notice more than one. By 2024, you can see Sanda Town there, and many panels up by the date, you'll notice. Let's zoom in again, Wu Wei before and after. That's a better shot. You can see the greenway. I'll go back so you can see, look at 2020 to 2024. A lot more color. Let's zoom over. Sandatang is the translation is 3 generations under one roof. Another one of those horses that they love to make with solar panels. There it is, a picture back in 2023. You can see we're out here in the sandy dune deserts. Let's zoom in on this village. Again, it was nothing in 2012. And here it is in 2024. Some agrivoltaics, solar panels, but these are also biodigesters. And the most recent update is even more. So we saw their last 5-year plan in China, the newest 5-year plan, and most recently, this is the most recent update, is just scaling up. So this might have been 2 weeks ago. Within the last month, China announced they'll be doing another 253 gigawatts of anti-desertification agrivoltaics. So it was the name is the Photovoltaic Desertification Control Plan for 2025 through 2030. You can look that up, released by the National Forestry and Grassland Administration, the National Development and Reform Commission, and the National Energy Administration to install all this agrivoltaics on as much as 1.66 million acres by 2030. Will that unleash the green dragon? We don't know. Can they green China? Trade wars, maybe they can't sell their panels to the United States. They'll use them all at home and cover all the deserts. I don't know. But if China can tap into this food, energy, water nexus that's possible under solar panels, it could be the remedy that they've been looking for quite a long time. They need something at scale. They need to maximize the water resources that they have. They need to restore soil. They need to grow more of their own food. They're doing quite well with what they have. They're growing 80% of their own food. I think it's still the largest agricultural production in the world with all those high density, high yield greenhouses. But if they can electrify, cut their dependence on energy imports as well, solve for water scarcity, remediate their brownfields, that's quite a powerful recipe indeed, even geopolitically. But what about their population problem? We'll come back to that. Is this a recipe for containment failure? Right? If they don't need to pull all that oil through the Straits of Hormuz and the Straits of Malacca, if we can't blockade China, cut off their food supplies as we can today, does that actually free their hand to invade Taiwan? I don't know. Is it a recipe for a competitive rebalance? Right? Someone's going to build the robot army. I've seen that movie. We all have. And China is well underway. And we are as well. But this is the new race, and China is playing its hand in its own way. Are we falling behind? Have they got the jump on us? A lot of analysts will disagree on this point. But I will say we're not too far behind, maybe at scale, but agrivoltaics in America is breaking out, has broken out. You can check out this incredible map from the Inspire project on Wiki. if you're listening, it's if you just Google for Wiki Inspire agrivoltaics map, you will find it. And there you will see, I think this is a little out of date actually, 600 plus sites, 10,000 megawatts, 65,000 acres, a lot of sheep, a lot of conservation, pollinator habitat, but the crops are coming, more on the way, and we'll be putting some of that on display at the 2025 Solar Farm Summit next month. Can we leverage solar to do more like the Chinese? Absolutely. We talked in the part one of our webinar series about the rural problems in the United States. We have counties with insufficient tax revenue. We need more tax revenue. They have poor infrastructure. We need new infrastructure. Poor environmental quality, unemployment. We need answers to these problems. We have agribusiness exits. I grew up in a few different farming communities where it's tough. It's tougher every day. Every time we have the solar coaster and we have the agriculture coaster, the farm coaster. And every time it goes down, we lose farms and it's hard to get them back. Can agrivoltaics be that answer? The agrivoltaics answer stack? Sorta. It can. We can match them up 1-to-1. It is new tax revenue. It can be all these different things. We're going to look more at that next time and explore this question. Can solar save American farming and local food systems as it is in China? We have farming communities too. They need capital investment. They have land, better land. We have less deserts than China, although we got some pretty big deserts and plenty of farming in dry lands that's getting drier. But we have agriculture everywhere, and we can expand. We can save what we've got and maybe grow from there. Solar developers, they have capital to invest, and they need land. And with these new multi-purpose PV models, we can enable agriculture. We can enable ecovoltaics. We can enable conservation. We can think about multiple systems because it's really just farm infrastructure. And we can take the problems of one and create the opportunities for the other and vice versa. It's a real virtuous cycle that's potentially in front of us. Should we choose to seize the moment, and maybe now's the time more than ever, because as we're trying to scale solar in the United States, we're running into various roadblocks, community acceptance, land use conflicts. Some folks just will not want to see farmland converted into solar panels without saving the farming or improving the farming underneath, which I understand. But if we do think systemically and interdisciplinary, then we can start to achieve all kinds of things, previously maybe impossible things I've certainly been waiting for a long time as an economic developer, keen on rural development and community development in food deserts and urban areas as well. We call it food shed development. How can we create more local food? And this recipe, powered by the solar panels, the solar investment, we can combine something economic gardening and placemaking. Like the Chinese, we saw the village pop up in the desert. Well, we can kind of find communities suffering our menu options of despair and matching up the problems and the opportunities, filling the gaps. So if a community doesn't have a farmer's market, maybe we put one on the edge of town where we're going to do our solar farm, or many different other things. We're seeing solar developers donate land, buy fire trucks, do all kinds of things, just like other types of real estate development. We can go for good neighbor agreements, and maybe stack projects. Maybe there's another development. We can just start to think holistically. If we don't wait for the phone to ring for a solar developer to come say, hey, I want this, then let's prepare our communities for investment. Let's look around. Maybe there is a farmer on the edge of town who has a generational issue. He has an orchard or a vineyard and he does want to go solar. Well, maybe the community can get behind him. We can develop a larger plan and even get to the RFP process. So you can go to market. You have your community. It has its wants and needs, and you can communicate to solar developers, what that might look like, and go from there. We do it on the brownfield side of the house all the time. So just priming sites for investment, going to market, and maybe you're dreaming too big, maybe it's not the right fit. but you won't know until you test response and maybe revise from there. So this time, the real opportunity, China is going for it, and it's an opportunity for the United States. The power of proactive pro-agriculture development. And it's this combination, the solar land rush and the electricity gold rush is empowering local stakeholders, communities, and non-traditional development interests, as well as traditional development interests, to take charge, to implement integrated project models and economic gardening strategies to grow from the food economy up, from the farm out, and put the community first, conservation first, crops first, or critters first. I like to joke agrivoltaics is crops, critters, and conservation, and it can be all these different things. There's a lot of resources on our website. If you're curious to learn more, I hope to see you at the Solar Farm Summit, but you can find an Ag PV 101 page, links to all the incredible work that's being done at various government agencies and universities, and even the conference archives from our previous conferences. All the slides are freely available on our website, solarfarmsummit.com. That's it. The future is bright. Animals, those critters, livestock prefer it under the shade just like we do. Just like those vineyards, just like those tomatoes and peppers. We can do more with glass technology. We can double the harvest. We can implement these integrated models. We can capture all this value, and we can put food, water, and energy value right where we need it, particularly communities, farming communities, on the margins. They're drying out, they're dying out. They need revenue, they always need energy, air conditioning, and we can even go off grid with agrivoltaics. And the potential is profound. I hope to see you next month in Chicago at McCormick Place for the 2025 Solar Farm Summit, August 4th through 7th. We're going to be rolling up the sleeves for multiple days. Thanks to our incredible sponsor, American Farmland Trust, and all of our sponsors. Join us Monday afternoon. We'll have 3 tracks of forums: research, policy, and the farming forum. So there'll be as many boots as suits at the Solar Farm Summit. We'll have thousands of our brownfield cousins. They'll be working their land and development issues from that side. There's reciprocity between shows, so you can sneak over, check out some of that incredible content about pollution and soil and remediation and redevelopment. A lot of this can go together. Both areas of nonpartisan, bipartisan agreement. Brownfield's always 99-0 in the Senate, and agrivoltaics, multiple bipartisan bills proposed in Congress already, and many different states grabbing on, developing their own policies in the laboratory of our democracy, from Massachusetts to Oklahoma, to Michigan, to Minnesota. Indiana, yesterday, July 9th, was Indiana Agrivoltaics Day. So just seems to be something that makes sense to everybody. Let's use what we've got. Let's work backwards. Let's add value to agriculture while we're at it. We need energy with all these data centers and record demand growth. So we might as well make farmers part of the solution, make farming part of the answer, instead of farmers buying their own electricity. So that's it. Let me stop there. We're over time, so I'll just cut y'all loose. Thanks again. And we will be back for one more webinar next in 2 weeks. The final in this short summer series, the pre-conference series, and we'll have special guests from American Farmland Trust. Stay tuned to that. Subscribe to our newsletter on our website. Don't miss the emails. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel where we're streaming right now, I think. And thanks again, y'all. Appreciate you, and look forward to seeing you. Safe travels to Chicago, and keep up the great work out there, whatever your discipline. We're all in this together, and we're going to get there. The future is bright.